really looking forward to this presentation and sharing with you tools we've put together to help meet your business plan deliverable requirement. Today I'm going to spend, as I said, a few minutes queuing you up and setting the context for the real and very important part of our webinar, which is introducing you to a new tool we've developed with our partner, Steve Stoddard, to help you with the financial forecasting work while planning your network's products and services. I'm going to take a sec here and actually introduce Steve with his bio. I'll be handing the talking stick over to him in a few minutes. Steve is the Executive Director of the New Mexico Rural Hospital Network, which is a collaborative organization consisting of 10 rural hospitals with a mission to support and sustain quality health care. He is a fellow of the ACHE and has served the board as board president of the National Cooperative of Health Networks, NCHN. Steve has worked as the Executive Director of the Southwest Idaho Community Health Network, has spent time in rural hospitals in Texas and West Virginia. He earned his master's degree in healthcare administration at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill and his bachelor's degree at Brigham Young University in Provo. I've known Steve for quite a while now through our partnership with NCHN and my regular participation in their conferences. By the way, there's one coming up next week, and we're excited to have 4 of our Network TA team members in attendance there. I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes maybe getting us ready for Steve's presentation. As our focus as your TA provider is to improve the health and wellness of rural communities, and one of our key strategies is to focus you all as leaders to build your capacity. We do this by striving to provide you with resources to help you succeed in your grant projects. As we get started, I want to note that in talking about our business planning approach, I am referencing materials we provided to you in February in the Business Planning Toolkit. That webinar was recorded and is available on our website. So what is a business plan? It's really a compilation of plans. It can be created for an entire organization or for a portion of an organization, such as your grant projects. We've developed the toolkit with your grant projects in mind, and you'll notice that we have used that language throughout the guide and the template. In short, any business plan describes and demonstrates how each component of the project is working together, and in this way is useful to both internal and external readers, as it summarizes how all of your strategic, evaluation, operational, marketing, and financial plans fit together, and documents the project's aggregated effort and really expected sustainability. The primary purpose of a business plan is to convince external readers of the ongoing viability of the organization or project. It's a document that shows the viability 3 to 5 years into the future. Your external readers of your business plan may be potential or new partners or members or potential funders. With systems thinking in mind, a business plan illustrates the interconnections between the many plans. The interconnections that many plans have can be seen using a framework because it provides a structure to help understand both the different parts and the interactions between the parts. With your network development projects, you've already done a lot of planning, strategic, evaluation, marketing, and operational. And the good news is that you will be able to use aspects of those planning efforts as you think through and write your business plan. Here are the 3 steps to writing a business plan that we proposed in our webinar earlier in February. You need to gather your existing plans. These plans have information that you'll pull from for the content of writing your business plan. In phase 2, you'll want to be completing the development planning of your products and services. This is done for each of your network services. And when writing your business plan, and then while you get to the business of actually writing your business plan, that is compiling all of those plans into a document that describes the viability of your network. Oops. So it is in phase 2 that we'll be focusing today. This phase involves completing the strategic marketing, operational, and financial thinking for each of the products and services that are key to the sustainability of your project. During this phase of developing your project's business plan, each one of your products and services needs to be fully developed. There's no way to shortcut this work. Each service needs to be fully developed where you've thought through and documented each of the ways of thinking, strategic, marketing, operational, and financial, related to that specific product or service. By doing this careful work, you're ensuring that all of the interconnected components of your services are accounted for in both the operational and financial estimates. To do this work of developing your service, we've put together a tool for you that we call the Product and Service Canvas. This canvas will help you step through each of those 4 components of your service development. We first introduced you to the Product and Service Canvas during the February Writing a Business Plan webinar, and we've since made some improvements and piloted the next iteration at our March Business Plan and Product Workshop. We have this piloted version for you today, which worked great, by the way, at our workshop, and for you to download. Looking at that far lower left box is where the file is. There is both a completed sample canvas and also a template canvas. I'm going to walk through a sample service today. The sample we've selected is an annual educational conference that a network is providing to its target markets, which are its members, in order to get us ready for the financial thinking and to give us something specific to reference and talk through. This is the same sample that Steve will be presenting to you in the financial thinking section of the Canvas and the accompanying financial outlook forecasting spreadsheet that he has put together for you today and will be presenting. I have the next 3 slides are simply images from the sample canvas. I want to point out several of the assumptions and decisions that have been built into this sample because Steve will be referencing them as he describes the tools that he has put together for you to consider for financial forecasting. The first page of your Canvas includes an organizational profile. For our sample, again, we're considering the annual educational conference that a network is putting on. The network that we're referring to we're assuming 10 members, a mix of 3 CAUs and their associated rural health clinics, plus 7 community social service organizations that are members, and that the network covers a 3-county region. The network has a mission to improve the health and wellness of their communities and a vision that they want to be indispensable solutions for their members. Every Canvas also has some strategic thinking to go through. For this sample, the target markets we've selected are healthcare organization members and community social service organization members. The members for our target markets are the executive leadership and also program managers, clinical leadership, frontline healthcare professionals, volunteers, and social service professionals. We also like to double check that our service that we are working on indeed is aligned with the goals of our organization. Our educational conference meets the project goal of decreasing the impact of chronic disease with our communities and is aligned with our objectives of increasing collaboration with the network, and network members have improved clinical results. That's the first section of thinking through our Canvas. Again, this is a sample. It's of an educational conference that the network is putting on as a service, and we're developing all the components of the planning thinking for this sample service. The next section is the marketing thinking, and within the marketing thinking portion of the Canvas, we're figuring out how our selected service fits our target market's needs and then also the capacity of our network. We will be finding key messages that resonate with our target market, describing in their words how the service is either solving their problems, which are their pains, or creating a solution, their desired gains. For our sample target market, the jobs, we have thought through the jobs that they'd be working on, the pains that they experience while they're doing that work, and the gains that they wish or expect while they're doing that work. And we've developed some key messages. As an example, just so that you are hearing what we've thought through as Steve presents the financial forecasting section. The key messages are low cost and high value education for sharing the expense, learning how best practices for key health issues can be used within their own local communities, reducing avoidable hospital and ER admissions, and helping patients and community members be active and well and improve health outcomes. Now, after we've done thinking through and documenting our marketing work, we move into our operational work. This is where some of our decisions and assumptions get made, so they influence our financial assumptions as well. So the operational review is to demonstrate our project's ability and capacity to sustain the delivery of the product to our target markets. In this case, we're considering what kind of experience and relationship our target market wishes to have with us and how to deliver that. Well, in an educational conference, we thought about things like interactive learning, opportunity to practice new knowledge, and easy access to materials, along with a service delivery of one full-day conference with a couple plenary sessions and breakouts, classroom-style presentations, incorporate different personalities and learning styles. After we think through the delivery and the relationships, we also need to consider what kind of initiatives do we need to do, which means what is infrastructure do we need to develop in order to be successful delivering our product. These are things like selecting themes and topics, finding speakers, putting together our conference location. We also need to next identify resources needed to deliver our service, which is our educational conference in this sample, to our target markets, which are our members. We consider resources such as meeting space for up to 80 to 100 people, which is part of something that will influence our financial assumptions, that we're going to have speakers that in the breakout sessions will be volunteers, but in the plenary we'll be paying our speakers a fee. We also want to think about key partners, those organizations and people that are needed for us to be successful delivering our service to our target markets. For this sample, we thought of key partners as state offices of rural health, regional AHECs, school systems, and other local clinics and hospitals in the region. As we think through all of these parts of marketing and operational thinking, we document in our Canvas those decisions and assumptions that are going to influence our financial forecasting. And so, with that quick preview and introduction of our sample, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Steve. At this point, I'm going to change our presentation look and feel, and Steve's going to share his screen so that he can present to you the presentation and the forecasting spreadsheet. Steve, over to you.
Great, thank you. Can everyone see my slide?
Not quite yet. Hang on.
Okay. Showing that it's sharing, so hopefully we can see it soon.
I will do a caveat that we did indeed practice this. And here we go. All right, okay. Steve, we can see your slides now. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks for setting the stage, Cap. We appreciate that as well. So we're going to focus the rest of the time on financial outlook planning. And sometimes people get nervous when you start saying numbers or looking at financial information. And I'm here to reassure you it's all okay. It's fine. This is actually a good exercise and a very important part of preparing a new business or product or service. And so it is a critical component of looking to the future and planning and projecting things out. One thing just briefly, my network is based in New Mexico with the New Mexico Rural Hospital Network. I've been here 4 years now, and and then prior to that was 11 years with a network in Boise, Idaho. But one of the things our family loves here living in Albuquerque is the International Balloon Fiesta. That happens every fall. This is a picture I took of the International Balloon Fiesta. Of course, we have a lot of sunshine, a lot of blue skies. This fiesta happens every fall. And also what's fun about it is they have these mass ascensions in the early morning where 550 hot air balloons will literally take off within a very short time frame. And that's what this picture is about. So it's a lot of fun. It puts a lot of color in the sky and is literally, as I understand it, one of the most photographed events in the world, as far as just everyone there is taking pictures and watching these hot air balloons. Quickly, when I was 14 years old, as a scout, I decided to participate in an activity with our group called the 50-20 hike. And this is literally a situation where you hike or walk for 50 miles within 20 hours. In order to get the patch, that's what you've got to do, is that 20-hour requirement. And so our scout group got ready. We got to the start line. One of the things I realized was going to be a challenge for me as a 14-year-old, I had never stayed up all night before. And this literally starts at 6 o'clock in the evening on a Friday night and would go all night long until you finish the course. And so it's a long 50-mile walk or run. Some people would run a good portion of it as well. And so our group started out. We were all energized, excited. We had some light backpacks with just some snacks and sweatshirts and a few things like that to help with the overnight hours, and started our journey. And as we were going along on our walk, a lot of it was initially in an urban area. And so we're going through the city, and there's a lot to see, lots to keep your attention and focus, and just kept walking along. And of course would take little breaks here and there. They have bathrooms, all kinds of convenient things just along the way because of being in an urban area. And as we kept going and it got later and later, we left the urban area and started getting out into more of a rural area, and there were no city lights anymore. The road was no traffic on it, just people that were still walking and a part of this 50-20 hike. Our particular group ended up getting spread out. Everyone walks at different paces, and so we were scattered all over the place. And fortunately for me, I was with my scout leader and my dad. The three of us were together. And that was, for me, a lifesaver, because as we kept going and it got more difficult, I had those two to help me out and to rely on. Literally in the middle of the night, as we were walking through the rural areas, we had set up a couple of people arranged to come, and at that time we didn't have cell phones, so they would come and drive along the route and try to find us. And when they would find us, then they'd stop and give us some, bananas or something to kind of help us keep going along. And unfortunately, we only have one person out of about 4 or 5 that we had arranged that actually followed through and came and was there. And so we were so happy when we saw her with her minivan and gave us some refreshments and kept going. But this lady that came by also started picking up members of our group who had given up. Some, if they stopped and sat down on a bench or fell asleep, boom, they were just so sore that they couldn't get started again. They were like, okay, I'm done. I can't move anymore. And so as we continued this walk, my dad and the scout leader kept talking and talking and talking and talking about every topic imaginable. The thing I was grateful for is, even though I wasn't talking a whole lot, I was listening and that kept my mind engaged and focused on something other than the walk, and that was a lifesaver for me. As we started back into another urban area the following morning and it started to get light, I hit a wall physically. I just started feeling like, I don't think I can make this. I can't quite finish. I can't quite keep going because my muscles had frozen by that point in time as far as just used to that exact same pace and going for that long time. And my dad put his arm around me and said, "You can do it. You got this. You can finish." And that extra encouragement was exactly what I needed at that point in time. And so, we ended up finishing the course. It was about 14 and a half, maybe close to 15 hours when we got done. I don't remember ever being so sore before as far as my legs, but I was grateful that I completed it and got that thing out of the way, got that goal accomplished. And the main lesson that I learned in that whole experience was that for some challenges in life and in our work, it really helps to have other people to collaborate with. It really helps to have a support system. And that's a lot of what our networks are for our members, is we provide a place and a way to collaborate, to work on projects and things together. The other thing is, keep in mind, as network directors, it's helpful for you and I to network and to collaborate as well. And so that's why, having grantee groups like this or NCHN as well are great resources, because you have that opportunity to collaborate and work together. So moving on, my network, we started in 2011 with 6 members. We received a network development grant. I was hired as the first executive director for the group, and we have 10 hospital members. And you can see by the stars, they are literally scattered all over the state of New Mexico. And of course, me being based in Albuquerque, I'm fairly central to the group. So as far as an overview, the purpose of a financial forecast is to provide a projected financial performance of a business or product or service. And it's normally over a time period of 3 to 5 years. So typically you want your projection to be long enough that you can see how your projection changes over time. The other part is that the financial forecast is created by using assumptions about the business or service itself. And those are some of the things that Cap was covering for the example, the conference example. So it's important when you're starting out and looking at your financial forecast to keep in mind what are your goals. And of course, one of the questions is, what is your organization's goal for net income for that particular product or service? And so as an example, is your network wanting to make a substantial net income to help sustain your network? That could be a very good thing. I mean, maybe you need some sort of service or product that can help provide and sustain your network long term. Or in some cases, maybe your members want your network to provide a service or product at a low cost to help benefit them. And in other words, is your income goal to cover your costs, break even, rather than just to maximize your net income? And I think that's really important to think through and to be aware of, because obviously you want to make adjustments to your financial projections based on that goal and on those goals. Okay. Also, as far as this education conference example that we've been using, we have several key assumptions looking at this. So first off, we're planning from 80 to 100 attendees for the conference. We have 60% of them as members, so we have a member rate that we charge the members, and then a non-member rate as well. And so that has to factor into this. The network is going to hire staff for leading the project and planning it. The speakers we talked about will have a fee plus travel expenses. And those are the plenary speakers, not the other ones. The breakout ones will be volunteers. And then the AV and the location are all donated space and equipment from our members. Food's going to be covered as a cost. And then, of course, in this case, the financial goal is to provide an affordable conference as well as make some money for the network. So let's jump over to this spreadsheet, and this is the conference example. And hopefully everyone can see that at this point. Let's see, I'm trying to have it a little bit easier to see for everyone visually. Anyhow, what I did want to show on this spreadsheet is we've got 5 tabs at the bottom. Financial forecast is the first tab. We've got a revenue tab, a startup cost tab, an expenses tab, and then a glossary tab all along the bottom here. And on the glossary tab, I did want to point out that I've got a few different terms, financial terms listed here with their definitions that can be helpful to keep in mind as we go through this. So the first definition is break-even point, and this is the point at which revenue and expenses or costs are equal. And so there's no loss, but there's also no gain. It's just at that break-even spot. A product or service has reached a break-even point when it has reached enough revenue to cover those total costs. So that's always helpful to keep in mind, especially if the goal of a project is to break even. Capital equipment is another definition you'll hear about. These are items that cost quite a bit, and they are used to provide a service or to make or market or keep or transport products. So for example, in the U.S. accounting system, an item that costs $5,000 or more and has a extended lifetime of over 1 year is generally considered to be capital equipment or fixed asset of a business. The next definition is direct costs. And these are costs that are needed to produce or deliver a product or service, such as equipment fees, subscriptions, inventory replacement. Those could be things like payroll, fuel, travel, and they're typically costs that recur and that are repeated with each delivery or production of the product or service. That's a direct cost. The next one is indirect costs, and those are also known as overhead costs or administrative expenses. And those are typically related to general administration of the project or the organization. So for example, accounting services, board expenses, insurance premiums, office space rent, those types of things. And you normally allocate indirect costs based on an allocation amount. So in other words, if you think your whole business or service will represent 10% of the entire organization, then you would allocate 10% of your indirect costs to that particular project or product or service. We also have net income, and that is equal to total revenue minus total expenses. And that's really the goal of the financial outlook, is to get to that number, the net income number. Operating costs, these are the expenses that are related to the operation of a business, and they are the cost of resources used by an organization just to maintain its existence. So they include both direct and indirect costs. You might hear the term pro forma as well. And pro forma is a financial forecast based on assumptions or decisions that influence the financial outlook of a product or service. So we're calling ours a financial outlook, but you may also hear that term pro forma, and that's the same thing. Revenue, the funds generated from sale of goods or services associated with the main operations of an organization. And that's, of course, before you take out any expenses. So that's revenue is money coming in, expenses is money going out, and then what you're left with is your net income or net loss. The last definition is startup costs, and those costs include the one-time costs that are incurred during the development of your product or service. And so those might be capital equipment, they might be things like legal fees, consulting fees, software, those types of things that you need to do your, to have in place to even start your product or service. But it's not necessarily a recurring regular cost. So there's some brief definitions, and if we jump over to the overview financial forecast on the conference example, as you can see, we have 3 years represented. We have a revenue section, an expense section, and then at the bottom we have a net income section. And so the expense section includes startup costs, our direct costs, and all that broken out, and then our indirect costs all broken out as well. And then a total expense line, and then your net income at the bottom. And so briefly, jumping through each of these tabs real quick, one thing you'll find in these spreadsheets is I've put in all of the areas that you can adjust or change that don't have formulas in them in dark green. So for example, on the conference attendees, we've got 80, 90, and 100 listed for each year, and then the percentages broken out as far as members and non-members. We've got their fees over here in column E, and then their non-member fees listed there. And what's nice about something like this on a spreadsheet is that if I want to make a change, it's very easy to do that and see what the projection will be. Another thing is you'll notice that some of the cells have a little red triangle in the corner. And those are ones that I've just put in some notes to help you along with. So this one just points out that the dark green are the areas that you can change. So one example would be, let's say our total number of attendees in year 3, we think is going to end up being 120 people, not 100. And then that would automatically roll into all the changes as far as what that would look like financially for the conference. And I'll just change that back. We've also projected booth sponsorships, general sponsorships, and then come up with totals for the revenue. The next section is startup costs. On this particular example, we don't have any because we thought the AV and the locations were provided, and so we didn't have any startup costs for the conference. And then the last part of the example are the costs. And so we've got our direct costs in this section here, and then our indirect costs down below. And on the direct cost side, we projected 2 employees would be working some of the time towards this conference, and then estimated how many hours, what their wages were, and what that salary cost would be. We also assumed each year that the salaries would have a 5% increase annually, and then that the benefits are estimated at 25% of the salary, and that's where those numbers came from. Again, the dark green areas are ones that you can adjust as you need to, but this is just our example. And then we listed the expenses down below. Most of these expenses are just what you would project, and then the food, I put over here this little calculation on the side to calculate estimations for food costs. So if we had, for example, 80 attendees and breakfast was 10 and lunch was 15 and the snack was $7, our total food cost would be $25.60 for that section, and for that year, I should say. And then down below, the indirect costs are shown as well, based on an allocation to of 5%. And so anyhow, we estimated that by saying what is our monthly amount for each of these, and then roll that times 12 gives you the annual amount, and then you can decide what is the right allocation or good estimation of that. And we based that saying, okay, the total revenue in this case was, okay, it's around 20,000, 23,000, 26,000. We're estimating that that's maybe 5% of the entire network's revenue for that. Okay, and then all those numbers from each of these three tabs, the revenue, startup, and expense, roll up into the this financial forecast spreadsheet, which is the income statement. All right, let's jump back over to the slides, and we'll have some time for questions right at the end here, if there are some. So startup costs, that includes the one-time costs that are incurred during the development of your product or service, and might include some of those examples. And again, remember that startup or capital equipment and what that is, that it's expensive, it's usually over $5,000, and a lifetime of over 1 year. One example of capital equipment might be vehicles, for a lab courier service as an example. All right, so startup costs. We'll jump over now to the actual financial forecast tool that you have as well. This spreadsheet is very similar to the conference example, except the intent of this is for you to use it to project your financial forecast for your network's business or service, to use as a tool for that. As you can tell on this first tab, the financial forecast page, we've got sections for revenue, startup costs, direct costs. Startup costs I did include in here just because you only have them for the first year, and then they're basically a one-time cost, and then you're done with them. Then we've got indirect costs, and then of course your net income that now right now everything's looking negative just because we haven't put in actual numbers for the revenue side. Okay. And then the startup costs are right here. So if you have these items, this is what you could use for your startup costs. You might have different startup costs, and you would just substitute those out and type them in here and then type them in on the other page. These are automatically linked. These cells are automatically linked to the financial forecast tab as well. So that way, if you make any numbers or changes here, they do roll on up to the financial forecast page. Okay, and we'll jump back to the PowerPoint for a moment. Now we'll jump into direct costs. And so these are the costs that are needed to produce or deliver the product or service, such as equipment fees, subscriptions, inventory replacement. Some examples we've talked about before, the payroll, fuel, travel, and so forth. And we'll jump back to the spreadsheet portion of that. So we're going to the expenses tab now, and we're looking at the direct costs. And so on this tool, you can use this formula to figure out your direct costs for your staffing. So we've got different employees, how many hours that they worked, what those translate to on a yearly basis, what their wages are, and then you can get those estimates for the yearly expenses. To go to year 2 and 3, I just assumed a 5% increase, and that's noted there, and that can be adjusted over here in cell I-10. And then down below we've got the benefits listed and estimated based on a 25% fee, or 25% of salary. And then the other expenses are listed here. So we figure if we have monthly expenses and these amounts for software, insurance, supplies, travel, and so forth, in these cells, these are just annualized. And so that gives you your annual expenses for each of those categories. Again, you can change the categories if you need to. You can obviously adjust the amounts as you need to as well. And we've left extra space in there too if you have additional expenses that you might need to add. Okay, and then let's jump back to the PowerPoint. On the indirect costs, they're normally expenses that are related to the general administration, and they're often called overhead or administrative costs. And so some of these things are listed there: office space rent, insurance premiums, those types of things. And they are normally allocated based on the percentage of revenue from that product or service to the total revenue of the entire company. And we kind of went over that before on the example that I'll show you on this spreadsheet. We've got indirect costs. You can list those out. You can obviously adjust and change those, what the monthly amounts are, and then annualized, and then a percentage allocation. And again, you can base that on what your projected revenue is for this particular product or service compared to the whole organization, your whole network. And that will give you a good understanding or good estimate for this. And then these costs are based on that. And then I've got a 5% increase built in currently each year, and that can be adjusted over here if you feel like it needs to be different than that, just for the increase. All right. Now back to the slides. And we're on to revenue. Revenue is the income generated from the sale of goods or services associated with many operations, or the main operations of an organization, before you take out any costs or expenses. And so it's always a good reminder that income and revenue, for purposes of this, are different. That revenue is truly just the cash coming in, and income is the result of revenue minus expenses, revenue minus costs. All right, so some examples might be sales, consulting fees, dues, grants, sponsors, those types of things. So remember, there's different important things. Usually on revenue, it's the units sold per month times that price will give you your monthly revenue. And of course, your monthly revenue times 12 gives you your annual or yearly revenue. For example, let's say you're estimating a revenue of 10 consulting hours per month that you would be providing. And if it's $50, if that's your price, then $500 monthly revenue, and that could equate to $6,000 yearly revenue. Also, remember there's lots of different units for revenue source examples. So it might be hours if you bill per hour, legal fees or consulting fees, or typically an hourly type fee. Maybe it's a subscription, that in your service, and so that might be just an annual, quarterly, monthly type of fee that you receive. Registrations, for example, the conference example that we were looking at, and they're of course based on the number of attendees. Products sold, if you have a product, that would equate to your revenue coming in. A retainer fee. Some models are set up in that way, where you pay to have someone's expertise available for so much time available per month. And then there's dues, and I think most of you are familiar with that, but there's different formats. Some are membership type, some are annual, some are different time frames than annual. And so let's talk a little bit about revenue real quick on this example on the tool. We'll go to the revenue tab. And so since there are so many ways to calculate revenue, I've given you 3 different examples, and you may have to create your own if yours is something that's outside of these example situations. So the first one's a sales model, for example, the conference registrations. You take the number of items sold times the monthly units sold and your price per unit. And basically you can project your monthly revenue, your yearly revenue, and so forth. Right now I've got it set up so it assumes a 10% revenue increase in this particular model. Then down below we've got a fee-for-service model, and this might be consulting or strategic planning, subscriptions, those types of things. You normally have so much in fees coming in. You can project what your revenue is and your yearly revenue and so forth. Dues, you've got a category, member dues, price, and then estimate your revenue coming in for that. And then grants. A lot of you, of course, have grants, and those are typically flat amounts. And so on those, it's fairly easy unless you're only allocating a certain portion of the grants for a particular project. So those are what we've got on the overall spreadsheet. And remember, the goal is to figure out net income, which is your revenue minus total expenses. And the net income of a product or service illustrates the financial outlook or the forecast of what you're going for. This is the goal. And again, it's always worth, once you have that net income number, remember what your initial financial goal was. Was it to make money, to help sustain your network? So you want to have a high net income number in that scenario. Or if your goal is just basically to break even and help provide a service that your members might need, then you need to keep that in mind as well. And did you achieve that in your financial forecast? The other thing is, be willing to adjust your assumptions in realistic ways if you don't realize that net income goal. And so make some adjustments. That's why that spreadsheet is flexible, and you can make some changes that are realistic to that. And remember, you're kind of doing this to test whether that business can produce a profit. And then your financial forecast, if you have a negative result, then you may want to consider maybe not pursuing that project, or make other assumptions that will make it profitable, because you don't want to start out something that's not going to at least break even. Okay. Remember that it's important to be careful with your numbers. I think it's important to be conservative in your estimates. This example shows, hey, the guy's got thumbs up for the pro forma or the forecast. In other words, he projected really good results in that, and then the actual performance had a thumbs down. And that's not a great scenario to be in for you or for me. If we project great results and ultimately under-deliver, it's not. It's better to be in the other situation where you outperform what you projected. And so I strongly encourage you to remember that. So in conclusion, this is a picture not too far from our home of the Rio Grande River in the Sandia Mountains in the back in the fall. And this is here in the Albuquerque area of New Mexico. All right. That concludes my presentation for today, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'll turn the time back to Cap then.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for your work in putting this together for our network leaders and for presenting this new tool that we've got. For folks that are listening in, network leaders, I'm going to take one more minute to wrap up, and then I'll pass it over to Kiona to finish up the webinar. I'm just going to say that, you know, as Steve was mentioning in his story, you know, we're really in this together, and we as your TA providers are here to help you, not only as cheerleaders, but also to help you with the specifics of solving whatever issues you bump into or hurdles that you run into. So let us